So I think one of the things that surprises people about methamphetamine is that the majority of people use very infrequently, and they don't have many problems with it at all. So the drug itself is not so much a problem, but the way people use it can become a problem. So in Australia, about 70% of people use less than once a month. So just very occasionally, just when they go out or go to a festival or a party. And about somewhere between 15 and 20% of people use more than once a week, and they're probably experiencing problems at that end. So relatively small number of people experience problems, but when they do have problems, the problems can be quite severe. Well, there's a couple of things about that we know that for people who start any drug use early, they're much more likely to have problems later. So we try and discourage young people from using drugs for that reason. And the other thing is that until people are in their 20s, their brains are still developing, and especially during the teenage years. So drugs can affect the development of the brain, and we want to ensure that young people's brains develop very early. So that's why we have prevention programs for methamphetamine and for other drugs as well, to discourage young people from using drugs. So there's been a study that of experts asking experts around the world how dangerous different drugs were to the person using and to other people and society, and they were surprised to find that the harms to other people as a result of methamphetamine is relatively small. So most people, because of the media, I think about the dangers of methamphetamine and people being angry and aggressive and being harmful to other people, but in fact most of the problems are to do with the person using, and primarily because of the way that they're using the drug, and because the drug's illegal, they don't know what's in it, so it's quite dangerous to use. Yeah, I think if there's a couple of things that we know good treatment impacts on. We know that if people have problems with drugs, methamphetamine or other drugs, when they go into treatment, there's a whole range of benefits, including for them, their own quality of life improves, usually their drug use reduces, or sometimes they quit completely, but also to society. We know that for every dollar we put into treatment, we save $7 in other health costs. So in terms of providing treatment rather than a law enforcement approach, that has much bigger benefits to society financially. And also we know that when people go into treatment, they commit less crimes, and so that also has an impact on the community as well, a positive impact. Yeah, I think young people are an interesting special case because sometimes they have come from very traumatic backgrounds. So if young people start to use drugs early, there's often some reason for that behind it. Either they come from a family who uses drugs, or they've had some trauma behind them, or some difficulty early on. And so we need to deal with that, the family dynamic or the trauma or whatever has happened to them. And they've also often, we want to keep them, for example, in school. And so we need to do all that we can to keep them engaged with school, because we know that staying in school has better outcomes for people. And for young people, it's really important that they feel really comfortable with the person that they're working with. So engagement is really important. So that's at the more problematic end. But also there's a lot of, most young people who try drugs just try them occasionally. And we want to make sure that they understand both the benefits and the dangers of drugs so that they can make some good decisions about whether they choose drug use or not. Yeah, I think prevention is really important for young people. So in Australia we have some fairly well-researched prevention programs in school. So at school kids get a lot of education about drugs, and it's not just all negative and doom and gloom kind of messages, it's the facts about drugs, and we've seen a significant drop in the number of teenagers using drugs in Australia over the last few years. So we think that that is having an important impact. So prevention is really important for young people, and in Australia we have some really well-developed, researched prevention education programs for schools, and their school kids get education about drugs, and it's not all just the terrible things that happen to you and the doom and gloom. It's the facts about drugs, and we know that when you give kids the facts about drugs, they make good decisions and they generally decide not to use until later. I think that we need, when we're thinking about a service system for any drugs, there's multiple points where we need to think about. And I am so pleased to be invited here because I've learnt so much from being in Vietnam. And I think that a lot of the service system is kind of already in place but needs to be enhanced. So that there's already been a strong move from the detention centres to a more health response, and that's a really positive step. And I think there's some more policy level decisions that need to be made to expand methadone, the methadone services to be able to accommodate other people who use other drugs. And then in order to do that, we need to train the practitioners and the counsellors so that they can actually respond to other drug use. So there's multiple policy points at the practitioner level, and obviously more funding needs to go into services when they're expanding. But I think the other key thing is involving the people who use drugs and also their families in treatment, because we know that those two things improve outcomes for people.